The station hung in space like a jewel of steel, its surface glowing with streams of light. From a distance it looked peaceful, but everyone who traveled through it knew the truth. It was not peace that kept the place safe, it was control. The alien rulers of this hub trusted nothing and no one. Every visitor, no matter their rank or species, had to pass the security checks. There were no exceptions. The scanners stood like silent giants at the main gates. They were tall frames of shining metal, humming with soft blue energy. Anyone stepping through was stripped bare of secrets. These machines had caught smugglers hiding weapons in artificial skin, assassins carrying poisons inside bones, even war criminals who thought they could disguise their energy signatures. Here, there were no mistakes. If you carried danger, the scanners would find it. On this day, the gates were crowded as usual. Traders, diplomats, soldiers, and wanderers, all waiting for their turn. Among them, a group of humans stood quietly. They didn't wear the robes of traders or the medals of officers. Their clothes were plain, their faces calm. Yet around them whispers stirred. Humans were not unknown in the galaxy, but they were rare here. Many aliens saw them as reckless. Others admired their strange courage. Still, there was something unsettling about them. No one could quite explain it. Their steps were steady, their eyes always sharp, and they seemed to carry a weight that no scanner could measure. The line moved. The first human stepped forward. The scanner swept across his body, and the monitor flashed green. Clear. The guards waved him through. The second human followed. Again, the monitor flashed green. Another step closer to the station's heart. Then came the third human. He stepped forward slowly, his gaze fixed on the frame of glowing light. The hum of the scanner deepened as he entered. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The blue light passed over his head, down his arms, across his chest. Then the sound changed. The monitor flickered. A sharp, piercing tone echoed across the hall. The screen froze, locking onto one image, his chest. A red wave pulsed across the display, rising and falling in sharp peaks. Beep, beep, beep. The heartbeat filled the screen, louder and sharper than anything the guards had ever seen. The officer in charge leaned forward. His glowing eyes narrowed. He tapped the controls. The machine refused to move. No weapon was detected, no metal, no poison. Only the human's heart. Yet the system reacted as if it had found something far more dangerous. The hum of voices grew behind the line. Aliens craned their necks, whispering in their strange tongues. Some stepped back. They had seen scanners freeze before, but never like this. A scanner freezing meant one thing: threat. The chief guard barked an order. Scan again. The machine obeyed. The blue light swept across the human's body once more. But the moment it touched his chest, the screen froze again. Beep, beep, beep. Now louder. The red lines danced wildly, spiking higher with every beat. The guards stiffened. Their claws tightened on their staffs. The visitors shuffled back, their eyes wide. To them, it looked like the human carried a living weapon inside his body. But the human stood still, his face calm, his shoulders steady. He looked at the guards without fear. To him, it was just his heartbeat. To everyone else, it was something unknown, something dangerous. The chief pressed a hidden switch. Above the gates, the station lights dimmed for a moment. That was the signal, an alert sent to command. Secondary guards appeared from the sides, their armor blacker, their weapons heavier. They surrounded the human, but did not touch him. Not yet. The monitor still pulsed with the sound of his heart. The image of the beating rhythm filled the screen, its glow casting eerie light across the hall. The machine had scanned thousands of species, but never once had it treated a living organ as a weapon. Step aside, the chief ordered. His voice echoed, rough and tense. The human obeyed. He stepped out of the line, slow and calm, even as the guards moved closer around him. His group watched silently, but no one dared speak. They knew that one wrong word could turn this into something far worse. The crowd whispered louder now. What is it? Is it a hidden device? No, it's his heart. The machine only showed his heart. Fear spread. To the aliens watching, it was as if the human's body held a secret bomb. A weapon no one could see, no one could touch. The chief looked again at the readings. The heartbeats were not steady. They spiked with strange bursts, almost like waves of power. It was as if each beat carried something more than blood, something raw, alive, and untamed. He had never seen anything like it. "Take him to inspection," he finally ordered. The guards closed in, leading the human away from the scanners. The hall fell into silence. Every step he took echoed through the chamber, matched by the sound of his own heart pulsing from the machine. The rest of the humans moved forward quietly, but their eyes followed him. They knew this was not just a malfunction. Something inside him had shaken the most perfect security system in the galaxy. And for the first time, the guards looked uncertain. The station, so proud of its flawless control, had just been challenged. Not by a weapon of steel or fire, but by something much simpler. A human heartbeat. The sound of the heartbeat still echoed in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. Even after the human was led away, the strange rhythm seemed to hang in the air like a ghost. The guards had resumed their work, calling the next visitors forward, but nothing felt the same. The scanners hummed as usual, yet the aliens in line stepped through with nervous eyes. They whispered to one another, stealing glances at the empty space where the human had stood. The chief guard walked ahead with heavy steps, following the two armored soldiers who guided the human down a side corridor. The monitor readings replayed again and again on his wrist device. He had scanned countless species, creatures made of crystal, beings with liquid bodies, machines that walked like men, but never once had a simple pulse forced the machine to freeze. Inside the chamber, the air felt colder. The walls were lined with silver panels, and at the center stood another scanner, smaller but sharper. This was not for the public. This was the station's secondary inspection room, where even the smallest detail was stripped bare. The guards placed the human in the center. He stood calmly, his hands at his sides, as if he had nothing to hide. The chief stepped forward, his helmeted face tilted, glowing eyes fixed on the human's chest. "What device do you carry inside your body?" he asked. His voice was low, but each word carried weight. The human raised his eyebrows slightly. "Nothing. Only my heart." The chief's fingers tightened against his staff. "Do not lie. The scanners do not fail. They locked on your chest twice. What have you hidden inside?" "I told you," the human said, his voice steady. "It is only my heartbeat." The guards exchanged uneasy looks. Machines did not lie. The readings had shown spikes, bursts of energy stronger than most hand weapons. Yet here stood a man with empty hands, no wires, no implants, just flesh and blood. The chief tapped the console. The smaller scanner powered up, its frame glowing with pale white light. "Again," he ordered. The machine swept across the human. This time the display was even clearer. The screen filled instantly with red waves, lines leaping higher and higher as his pulse grew louder. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythm rolled through the chamber, filling it like a drumbeat. Each spike seemed alive, almost as if the machine itself struggled to contain the sound. One of the guards stepped back, his tail twitching nervously. "It is not a weapon," he muttered, his voice trembling. "It is something else." The chief said nothing. He replayed the scan in slow motion, watching the heart throb with power. The readings were unstable. The beats changed rhythm in strange patterns, not mechanical, not predictable. As the human stood there, his pulse shifted with every breath, every flicker of thought. The more the chief stared, the more uneasy he felt. This was not a device that could be dismantled or locked away. This was a living thing, and it carried an energy he did not understand. The human remained calm, but deep inside, he felt the weight of every eye on him. His heartbeat had always been his own, silent and unnoticed. Now, these creatures treated it like a weapon, like a secret he had never known he carried. His chest rose and fell, his pulse racing faster the longer they stared. And with each quickened beat, the scanner screamed louder. The chief slammed the console. The sound cut off, but the tension did not fade. The guards shifted uneasily, their claws tight on their staffs. For the first time, the great scanners of the station had not revealed a smuggled weapon. They had revealed something they could not explain. One of the younger officers spoke softly. "Commander, what if the stories are true?" The chief turned sharply. "What stories?" The officer hesitated, but the others knew what he meant. Whispers had traveled across space for years. Stories of humans who fought with nothing but willpower. Stories of human soldiers who survived wounds that killed stronger species. Stories of voices that could rally armies and hearts that never broke. The chief silenced the guard with a glare, but the thought lingered. Could it be that this was what the scanner had seen? Not a weapon made of steel, but the raw force of life itself. He looked back at the human, who stood tall, steady, almost defiant. His chest rose with every breath, and though the sound was muted now, the chief could still feel the heartbeat echoing in the room. The guards whispered among themselves in their native tongues. Some argued for arrest. Others wanted the scientists to study him. A few spoke in fear, saying he should be removed before the pulse grew stronger. The human broke the silence. "You treat me like I am dangerous, but I brought no weapon here. You know this." The chief stared at him for a long moment. His voice, when it came, was heavy with unease. "Maybe you are the weapon." The words fell into the room like a stone into still water. The guards froze. Even the human blinked, taken aback by the weight of the statement. Outside the chamber, word was already spreading. Rumors traveled faster than ships. In the crowded halls of the station, visitors whispered about the human whose heart had stopped the scanner. Some laughed nervously, others spoke with fear, but all agreed on one thing. Something powerful had arrived, and it was not made of metal. Inside, the chief paced slowly. His mind turned in circles. If this was true, then every human was a living storm. Every pulse a hidden power. And if so, how could the station ever control them? The human stood still, silent, his heartbeat steady but strong. The air in the chamber was thick, as if the sound itself pressed against the walls. Suspicion had filled the air, but beneath it was something deeper. Fear. The kind of fear that comes not from what you see, but from what you cannot understand. And in that moment, every alien present realized the same truth. If a simple heartbeat could shake their machines, what else could a human do when pushed to the edge? The chamber door closed with a heavy hiss, sealing the human inside with the guards. The sound echoed like a warning, as if the station itself wanted to remind him there was no way out. The air inside was sharp and cold, filled with the faint buzz of hidden machines. The walls glowed faintly with blue light, a reminder that every inch of the room was wired for control. The human stood in the center, calm but alert. His eyes studied the guards, their black armor reflecting the dim glow. They moved with practiced discipline, but even through their helmets, he could sense unease. They had dealt with smugglers, assassins, and war criminals, but none of those had ever made the scanners scream at the sound of a living heartbeat. The chief of security entered last. His tall frame filled the doorway before he stepped inside, his long cloak dragging across the floor. His glowing eyes fixed on the human immediately, cold and sharp, like knives cutting through silence. He did not speak at first. Instead, he circled slowly, watching, measuring, waiting for the human to betray himself. Finally, his voice broke the silence. "What are you hiding?" The human's answer came steady. "Nothing. I carry no weapon." The chief's hand slammed against the wall panel. A screen flickered alive, replaying the scan. Red waves pulsed across it, sharp spikes that seemed to rise with each breath the human took. The sound of the heartbeat filled the room again, deep and steady, like a drum that would not stop. "Nothing?" the chief repeated, his voice tight with disbelief. "This is not nothing. The machine does not lie. It's only my heart," the human said, his tone calm but edged with quiet strength. One of the younger guards hissed in their alien tongue. The human did not understand the words, but the tone was clear: fear. The chief raised a hand to silence his men, but the unease in the room thickened. The chief leaned closer, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Do you expect me to believe that a simple muscle, beating in your chest, can do this? The readings show bursts of energy stronger than weapons we lock away every day. How do you explain this? The human tilted his head slightly, unafraid. I don't need to explain it. It is what it is. My heart beats. Your machine reacts. That is the truth. The calmness in his voice unsettled the guards more than anger would have. He stood like a man who carried no shame, no guilt, and no fear. The chief growled. Do you mock us? Do you think this is a game? The heartbeat on the screen spiked as the human's pulse quickened. Beep, beep, beep. The sound filled the room, sharper, louder. The guards stiffened. One even raised his weapon instinctively before catching himself. The chief glanced at the screen, then back at the human, realization dawning slowly. The heartbeat changed with emotion. You're doing this? The chief whispered. When you grow angry, it grows stronger. The human gave no answer, but the faintest trace of a smile touched his lips. Not defiance, just truth. The chief slammed the console again. Restrain him. 2 guards stepped forward, gripping heavy shackles. They reached for the human's arms, but as they touched him, the screen erupted with wild red lines. The heartbeat thundered through the chamber, shaking the walls like distant thunder. The guards froze, their hands trembling. It reacts to touch, one stammered. The chief barked, hold him, but the guards hesitated. For the first time, their discipline cracked under fear. The human remained still, not resisting, yet his very presence made their technology falter. The screen glowed so bright with red that the image distorted. The steady rhythm of the machine was no longer mechanical. It was alive, raw, and powerful. The chief stepped forward himself, his tall frame towering over the human. What are you? He demanded. The human's voice was quiet, but the words carried across the chamber. I am what you fear. Not because I carry a weapon, but because I don't need one. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the pounding echo of the heartbeat. Beep, beep, beep. The sound seemed to crawl into the walls, rattling the guards' nerves. The younger officer who had spoken earlier whispered again, his voice trembling. The stories. They said this was true. The chief snapped his gaze to him. Silence. But the damage was done. Every guard in the chamber was now thinking the same thing. The stories of humans, their strength, their defiance, their will that could not be broken. Maybe this was the proof. Maybe their hearts themselves carried the power of that will, a force no scanner could control. The chief clenched his jaw. He would not show weakness in front of his men. Take him to holding. The scientists will tear apart this mystery. The human's eyes darkened at the words, but he did not resist as the guards surrounded him again. They kept their distance, hands shaking slightly as they walked him toward the door. The heartbeat still echoed in the room, each beat stronger than the last, as if mocking their fear. As the door hissed open, the chief remained behind, staring at the fading red glow of the screen. His thoughts raced. If this was true, then every human carried such a force inside them. Every man, every woman, every child, walking weapons that no metal detector could stop. For the first time in years, the chief of security felt something he had not felt in a long time. Doubt. And as the human's footsteps faded into the corridor, that doubt grew louder than any alarm. The holding chamber was deeper inside the station, far from the noise of the arrival gates. Few were ever taken there. It was a place reserved for those who posed questions the scanners could not answer. The walls were heavy black alloy, layered with strange energy fields. Even the air felt different, pressing down on anyone who stepped inside. The human sat calmly on the metal chair at the center, his hands resting on the table before him. His heartbeat had quieted, but the silence felt deceptive, like a storm hiding just beyond the horizon. Guards lined the walls, weapons ready but hands uneasy. They watched him closely, though none dared come too close. The door opened with a slow hiss. A new figure entered, taller, thinner, draped in a long silver coat that shimmered under the lights. His skin glowed faintly with veins of green, and his large, unblinking eyes studied the human with interest rather than suspicion. This was no soldier. This was the station's chief medical examiner, one of the brightest alien minds. He walked to the table, carrying a small device that floated in the air beside him. "Leave us," he ordered softly. His voice was calm, but layered with authority. The guards looked at each other, hesitating. Now, reluctantly, the guards stepped back toward the walls, though they did not leave the room. Their weapons remained pointed at the human, but their bodies tensed, ready for anything. The examiner circled the table slowly, eyes never leaving the human. "Your people," he said, his voice curious. "They are fragile in some ways, yet here you sit, surrounded, unafraid. Why?" The human's answer was steady. "Fear doesn't change truth. You think I hide something inside me. I don't. It's only my heart." The examiner's eyes flickered with light. "Yes, the heart." He tapped the floating device, and it glowed brighter, projecting images from the earlier scans. Red lines, sharp and irregular, filled the space above the table. "Machines don't lie. And yet what we see here—" His voice trailed off. He leaned closer. "This is not simple biology. Every emotion you feel, fear, defiance, anger, creates waves of energy our instruments cannot understand. Your heartbeat is not just sound. It is force." The human said nothing. His silence carried more weight than words. The examiner pressed again, his voice growing sharper. "Do you realize what this means? You are alive in ways we cannot measure. You are power wrapped in flesh. We have studied thousands of species across this galaxy. None show this. None. Only humans." The guards shifted uneasily. Their eyes darted between the examiner and the prisoner. Whispers passed through the air, soft and nervous. Some of them had heard stories. Warriors who fought longer than logic allowed. Survivors who endured when no other species could. Now those whispers felt real, confirmed by the glowing images above the table. The examiner's tone softened again, though his eyes burned with curiosity. "You must understand. This frightens them. Weapons can be taken. Machines can be disabled. But this," he pointed at the floating red waves, "this cannot be removed. It lives inside you. It grows with you. It answers only to you." The human finally spoke. "You fear it because you cannot control it." The examiner paused, then gave the faintest nod. "Yes, that is true." The silence thickened. The guards' hands trembled slightly against their weapons. They did not want to admit it, but they all felt the same thing. They were not staring at a man. They were staring at something their systems could not cage. One of the guards muttered in a low growl, "This is dangerous. He should be destroyed." The examiner's head snapped toward him, his glowing eyes narrowing. "And how will you destroy a thing you don't understand? Do you think a blade, or a shot, can silence what beats inside him?" His heart would only rage louder. The human's eyes locked with the guards. He did not move, but his chest rose slowly with a deep breath. The scanner in the floating device twitched instantly. The heartbeat spiked, beep, beep, beep dot. Sharper, harder. The guard froze in place, his weapon trembling as if the sound itself shook his body. The examiner looked back at the human, wonder mixing with fear. "It reacts to everything. Thought, breath, feeling. This is no accident. This is your nature." The human's lips pressed into a thin line. "It is life. Nothing more." "Life?" the examiner repeated, almost whispering. "But life that carries power. Do you understand what kind of weapon this is, to those who fear it?" The human's eyes darkened. "It is not a weapon until someone forces it to be." The examiner studied him for a long time, then slowly leaned back. "Perhaps that is what terrifies them most. Not that you choose to fight, but that if you did choose, nothing could stop you." The guards exchanged glances. Some swallowed hard, others looked away. For the first time, they saw not a prisoner, but a storm caged in human skin. The examiner turned to the chief guard standing by the door, who had entered silently minutes earlier. "You cannot treat him like the others. If you do, you risk proving the story's true." The chief's jaw tightened. He did not like the words, He did not like the fear spreading among his soldiers. But even he could not deny what he had seen. The scanner had not lied. The human sat in silence, but inside his chest, the heart continued its rhythm. Strong, steady, untamed. And in that moment, the examiner realized the truth. It was not machines that gave humans their strength. It was not weapons or ships. It was the pulse of something deeper, the force of will, the fire of emotion, the refusal to break. A dangerous revelation, one that could not be hidden anymore. For in the galaxy's most secure station, the most feared weapon was not forged by hands. It was carried in the chest of every human who lived. The revelation spread faster than the guards could contain it. Whispers leaked from the chamber into the long steel corridors of the station. By the time the human was escorted back to his holding cell, every guard and officer in the sector had already heard the story. They did not speak of it loudly, but in hushed voices, with eyes that flicked toward shadows as though the walls themselves might betray them. The machine froze at his heart, one muttered in the mess hall. They say the rhythm shook the scanners, another whispered back. It wasn't a device. It was him. The more the story traveled, the less it sounded like an error and more like a legend unfolding in real time. Inside the command wing, senior officers gathered around a long black table. Their faces were pale, their eyes sharp. Some carried the look of seasoned fighters, others of scholars who trusted science above all else. Yet even among them, unease crackled like static. The chief of security stood at the head of the table. His armor gleamed under the white lights, but his voice carried a weight that betrayed his doubts. The scanners do not malfunction. They do not invent threats. What they detected was real. His heartbeat carries a force beyond our understanding. The room fell silent. Finally, one of the senior commanders slammed a hand against the table. Then destroy him, before it spreads further. A soldier's heart is not a weapon. It must be an abomination. Do not treat it as mystery. Treat it as danger. A scholar in a pale robe shook his head quickly. No. To destroy what you don't understand is ignorance. If humans carry this power naturally, imagine what could be learned. Imagine the control we could have if we harnessed it. Murmurs rippled through the table. Some nodded in agreement. Others sneered in disgust. The line was clear. Half the officers saw the human as a threat to be erased, the other half as a resource to be exploited. And all the while, the guards posted outside listened, their jaws tight, their claws restless. Even they could not hide the fear building in their chests. They had seen the scanner screens glow red. They had felt the pulse echo in their bones. In his cell, the human sat in silence. The air was heavy with tension that pressed against the walls. He could hear faint noises outside, the whispers of guards, the crackle of comm devices, the uneven steps of soldiers who usually walked with discipline. He knew what it meant. Fear. They feared what they did not understand. And fear always divided people. He closed his eyes for a moment, his chest rising and falling. His heart beat steady, not loud, not soft, just enough to remind him he was alive. He knew the sound of it haunted them. He could almost feel their unease beyond the walls. Back in the command room, voices rose louder. You saw the readings, the scholar insisted. That energy could power weapons, shields, entire fleets. One heartbeat could be the key to bending human will into galactic advantage. And you think they will give it freely? The commander snarled. Do you not see what this means? If every human carries this, then every human is already armed. Entire armies of them could march without a single blade, and still our machines would fail before their pulse. This is not something we can control. It is something we must destroy. The chief of security raised a hand, silencing them. His voice was quieter but sharper than any shout. You both missed the point. What frightens me is not whether it can be used or destroyed. What frightens me is that he has done nothing, and already he has shaken us. Do you not feel it? We argue like children because of a man who simply sat and breathed. The words landed heavy. For a moment, silence returned. No one wanted to admit it, but the chief was right. The human had not threatened them, had not fought them. Yet his very presence had cracked their unity. Among the lower ranks, the tension was worse. In the barracks, young guards whispered about refusing to enter the chamber with him again. Others spoke of the stories they had heard. Humans who lifted mountains in desperation, who fought until their last breath and beyond, who inspired whole armies to rise from defeat. The whispers spread like fire, and with every retelling, the human's heartbeat grew louder in their minds. In his cell, the human opened his eyes. He could feel it, fear pressing from outside like a storm. But under it, something else stirred. Not just fear, doubt, division. He had seen it before in wars fought on distant worlds. A single crack in unity could split entire armies apart. He leaned back against the wall, calm, his gaze fixed on nothing. His heart kept its rhythm, steady, relentless, a sound that no wall could block. In the command wing, arguments rose again, louder than before. Hands slammed against the table, voices shook with anger. The chief finally turned away, walking toward the door. He could feel his officers tearing at each other like predators fighting over prey. And at the center of it all was one man, unarmed, silent, sitting in a cell. The revelation had been dangerous, but what followed was worse. Suspicion had poisoned them, turning soldiers into worriers, officers into schemers. And though none of them would admit it out loud, they all feared the same truth. If one human heartbeat could divide them this deeply, what would happen when the rest of humanity arrived? The chamber chosen for the experiment was buried deep within the core of the station. Few had ever seen it, and fewer had ever left it. The walls curved inward like the ribs of a giant beast, reinforced with heavy metal and humming with hidden energy fields. The air was colder than before, sharp and dry, carrying the faint scent of ozone. Everything about the place whispered one truth: it was built for breaking prisoners. The human was led inside by 6 guards, their weapons drawn though their hands shook slightly. He walked calmly, his steps steady, his eyes scanning the room without fear. Chains hung from the walls, energy restraints pulsed with faint blue light, and in the center stood a chair of steel designed to hold even the strongest warriors. At the far end of the chamber stood the alien commander. Taller than the guards, armored in black and gold, his presence filled the room like a storm cloud. His voice was cold when he spoke. "The machine claims your heart is a weapon. We will test this. If it is true, we will know. If it is false, you will not leave here alive." The human met his gaze without flinching. "Do what you think you must." The guards strapped him to the chair. Energy restraints locked around his wrists and ankles, glowing brighter as they tightened. The room vibrated faintly as the systems activated. The heartbeat monitor came online, projecting the rhythm above him in glowing red waves. Beep, beep, beep. The sound echoed through the chamber like a drumbeat of defiance. The commander raised a hand. A scientist in a silver robe stepped forward, carrying a control device. "We will begin with fear," the commander ordered. The lights dimmed, and images filled the walls. Projections of war, destruction, fire, and endless death. Alien screams filled the air. Weapons tore across fields. Shadows of monsters lunged. It was an illusion meant to break the mind, to make the pulse tremble with terror. The human's eyes stayed steady, his chest rising slowly. His heartbeat changed, but not as expected. Instead of shrinking, instead of faltering, the rhythm grew louder. The waves on the monitor spiked higher, each beat stronger than before. Beep, beep, beep. The scientists stared in disbelief. "The energy is rising," one whispered. The commander frowned. "Increase it. Show him more." The walls shifted again. This time, the illusion was personal. Faces of people he had once known, twisted in pain, calling his name, begging for help. The guards leaned forward, expecting him to break. But the human's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with anger rather than fear. His chest rose sharply. The monitor screamed. The red waves exploded upward, shaking the holographic display. Beep, beep, beep. The sound grew so strong the guards felt it in their bones. One stumbled back, clutching his chest. "This isn't fear," he gasped. "It's stronger." The scientist's hands trembled as he studied the readings. It converts fear into energy. The emotion fuels it. The more intense the feeling, the more violent the response. The commander's eyes narrowed. Enough illusions. We will test hope. The images shifted again. The walls glowed with visions of light, distant planets at peace, children laughing, skies without war. The sound of music filled the chamber, gentle and calm. The human's eyes softened, and for a moment, a faint smile touched his lips. His chest rose, slower now but steady. The monitor responded again. Spikes of rhythm, not as sharp as anger but deeper, stronger, like the steady pounding of waves on a shore. The sound filled the chamber, not violent this time, but unstoppable. The scientist whispered, his voice full of awe. Even hope carries power, not destructive but vast, like energy spread across time. The guards exchanged nervous glances. If fear and anger gave him strength, hope gave him endurance. Both were dangerous in their own way. The commander's voice dropped to a growl. We will test rage. The images shifted once more. This time, they showed betrayal. Friends turning against him, allies abandoning him, enemies laughing in his face. The human's eyes darkened. His chest heaved, his jaw clenched. He pulled against the restraints unconsciously. Beep, beep, beep. The monitor shrieked. The waves spiked so violently the holographic display flickered. The entire chamber trembled as the restraints strained to contain him. The guards stumbled back, weapons raised but useless against the unseen force. The scientist's voice cracked. The readings are off the scale. If this continues, the system will collapse. The commander did not flinch, though his claws dug into his palms. Then let it collapse. I want to see the limit. But the human's voice cut through the noise, deep and steady despite the storm inside him. There is no limit. That's what you fear. The words shook the room as much as the heartbeat. The commander's eyes narrowed, but even he could not deny the truth. Every test they had tried, fear, hope, rage, had not weakened him. Each one had only made him stronger. The restraints groaned under the force of his body. The scientist shouted, "We must stop, or the systems will fail." Reluctantly, the commander raised a hand. The illusions vanished. The lights returned. The heartbeat slowed, but it did not fade. The monitor still glowed red, the rhythm strong and relentless. The human sat back in the chair, sweat on his brow, but his eyes steady, unbroken. His voice was quiet but clear. You wanted to test me. Now you know. Humans don't carry weapons. We are weapons. Not because of steel, not because of fire, but because of this. He tapped his chest lightly. Because of what beats inside. The guards said nothing. The scientist lowered his gaze, trembling. The commander stood tall, but even he could not hide the weight in his eyes. He had tested the human, and the truth was undeniable. The most dangerous force in the galaxy was not a weapon forged by hands. It was a heartbeat that refused to break. The test chamber was silent after the storm. The machines had dimmed, their lights flickering weakly as if drained by the force they had tried to measure. Guards stood stiff against the walls, their weapons still in their hands but no longer steady. The scientist clutched his device close to his chest, his face pale. The human sat bound in the chair, sweat shining on his skin, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. But even in the quiet, the heartbeat remained. Beep, beep, beep. Strong, relentless, impossible to ignore. The commander broke the silence first. His voice was low but sharp, like the edge of a blade. Release him. The guards froze. One dared to speak. Commander, that is dangerous. We cannot. I said release him. The commander's eyes glowed with cold fire. There was no space for disobedience. Reluctantly, the guards unlocked the restraints. The energy bands hissed as they loosened, and the human's arms fell free. He did not rise immediately. He simply flexed his fingers, rubbed his wrists, and looked around the chamber with calm eyes. The commander stepped closer. His tall frame loomed over the human, but there was no triumph in his stare. Only something harder to name, respect mixed with fear. You have proven what you are. A force that cannot be measured. a truth that cannot be contained. But tell me, human, do you know what this means? The human stood now, slow and steady. His eyes met the commander's without flinching. It means you will never control us. You may cage us, you may fear us, but you will never own what makes us human. The guards stiffened. The scientist whispered to himself, never own it. As if the words themselves explained everything. The commander's jaw tightened. For a moment, the chamber seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a heavy exhale, he turned away. Escort him out. Let him walk. The guards looked at each other in shock. Some protested under their breath, but none dared defy the order. Slowly, carefully, they moved into formation, surrounding the human but leaving distance between them. Not one touched him. Not one risked it. As they walked him through the long corridors of the station, whispers followed like shadows. Aliens paused mid-step, staring at the group. Word had already spread through every hall and chamber. The human whose heartbeat broke the scanners. Some stared with fear, stepping back as if his very presence could shatter walls. Others watched with awe, whispering stories that would grow larger with each retelling. In their eyes, he was no longer a man. He was something else. A reminder of power that did not come from machines, but from within. The human walked steadily, his heartbeat calm but firm, the sound echoing faintly from the monitors above. Each step seemed to shake the fragile unity of the station. Each glance cast his way carried the weight of new doubt. By the time they reached the main gates, a small crowd had gathered. None blocked his path. The guards parted to let him through. The human stepped into the wide open bay, where ships waited under the glow of stars. The chief of security was there, his eyes following every move. He did not speak, but his silence was louder than words. He had seen the tests. He had seen his own men falter. And now, watching the human leave, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. The human paused at the threshold. He turned back just enough for his words to carry across the hall. His voice was steady, but it struck like thunder. You thought machines would protect you, but no machine can understand what it means to fight, to hope, to rage, to love. That is what we carry inside us. That is why you fear us. And that is why you will never break us. The silence that followed was heavy, unbroken even by the hum of engines. The guards lowered their eyes. The crowd shifted uneasily. The commander's fists clenched at his sides. The human stepped onto the platform, his figure framed by the stars beyond. His heartbeat remained steady, louder in memory than in sound, echoing inside the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. And in that moment, the truth settled deep into the station's core. The most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was not a blade, nor a gun, nor a machine. It was the pulse of a human heart, carrying the force of will, the fire of hope, and the strength of rage. It was unstoppable. The human disappeared into the dark of space, but his presence lingered. The aliens remained frozen where they stood, caught between fear and awe. For in one day, everything had changed. The scanners that had never failed had revealed a truth no one could erase. Humans did not need weapons. Humans were the weapon. And across the galaxy, that truth would spread, quiet at first, then louder, like a heartbeat growing in the dark, until no one could ignore it.